Hey everybody, welcome to the Unleash Your Confidence show. My name is Jessie Jamias and we are here today with Jen Fontanilla and we are talking money. Hey Jen, how are you?
Hi Jessie, I'm great. How are you?
Awesome, I'm so good. So why don't we start off with telling people a little bit about your background, a little bit about what you do as far as money coaching and all that kind of stuff, and why you are so passionate about this topic.
Yeah, so I've been in financial services or this finance industry for over 15 years. And originally what happened was I was actually a graphic designer before. And I remember sitting at my desk and I was making a pretty somebody in my mid-20s, and I sat there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm making this money and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with it. Thankfully, I was a good saver. I wasn't somebody that was like, buying this and that and, racking up a lot of debt. I at least had that foundation, but there was something in me that was realizing I didn't learn what to do with it. And I think that's what started it, is that you go through school. So many people can relate to this story. You go through school and you realize I didn't learn life skills. And I realized at that point, I thought, if I'm feeling this way and I did go to college, how many other people are feeling, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with the money? So from that point on, I decided to go into finance and I got licensed. So over a decade, I was a financial advisor. So I used to transact investments. I still do insurance, but it was more the retirement planning back then. And then I started realizing as I was working with people that the foundation wasn't there. And what do I mean by that? A lot of people would want to come in and like, hey, I have $1,000, I want to invest it. But then when I took a look at their overall picture, I realized that there was debt, there were things that weren't in place in terms of a sound budget or a spending plan. We like to use that word because nobody likes the B word. And I realized that everybody wants to jump to the higher level, like, because I think investing sounds sexy, right? Ooh, I have a portfolio. Oh, I'm invested in the market. Nobody thinks it sounds all great and fancy, like, hey, I did a budget. So I understand that, but I think people want to have this concept, this sexy concept of like, hey, I'm investing. But at the end of the day, what happens is when that foundation isn't set, then that's building a financial house on rocky land. And so I started realizing after seeing it a lot, I'm like, you know what? We're not taught this stuff, but we're also not taught where the foundation needs to be built. And so I realized the coaching was a space that I wanted to go into more and really walking people through a process, because it's a lot different than sitting down with somebody and doing a retirement plan or, helping them figure out their long-term goals. That's one of the differences. When you're a financial advisor, you're looking at, 15, 20, 30 years out. But when you're doing coaching, you're helping somebody go through the day-to-day management and even diving into further concepts of mindset. The journey that I've been on, and I'm also an author and a speaker, so I absolutely love talking to people. I definitely miss being live, but you know what, we make the most of it. So Zoom has been such a saving grace during this COVID quarantine time.
Yeah, totally. Hey, oh my gosh, you know what, it really sticks out to me is I love that you say that you can't build a house on rocky ground. And the whole, investing comes across as sexy. And for a lot of people, especially that once you start investing, you're like, oh wait, this isn't so sexy, right? Because sometimes it's volatile or whatever you're investing in. But I love that you say you can't build on a rocky ground. And so that's just it, right? We have the knowledge and the ideas that we can just start investing and start putting our money into different places. But if we don't have the foundation, then I don't want to say it's going to fall apart, but it kind of might, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think is the explanation of mastering your money? Like what is your opinion of mastering your money?
I think it has to do a lot with your mindset. So when we think about money, a lot of times we get so fixated naturally to, oh, look at the numbers. Oh, what are the balances in our bank accounts or our savings, our checking, and our retirement accounts and things like that. And that is a part of it. And this is also one of the things that really, really drew me into the coaching side, because I took it a step further where it wasn't just about budgeting and setting goals. And those are all important components. But one thing I do with clients is when I separate, there's money coaching and then there's financial coaching. So the financial coaching is the numbers stuff, the spreadsheets and doing the budget. But the money coaching is more dealing with the psychology and the mindset and understanding where the subconscious patterns come from. So for example, did you learn something that you're doing a certain way that you're reacting to money or dealing with money from your mother, or was it from your father, or is it something that's self-actualized, meaning it didn't come from either of them, but that was something that you inherited on your own? And so when I talk about mindset, it's all of those things. They really, really affect us at the core, and we don't realize it sometimes. Society is always showing us, oh, do the budget or save for retirement or save for a rainy day. And I think I feel like it's still kind of new, but it's not. But I think, with social media, these concepts are starting to take more platform in terms of like being exposed to people to really, really think about it. So mastering your money when it comes to your mindset is understanding these subconscious patterns. So, for example, did you grow up and you might have heard some phrases like, well, money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that. Or, those kinds of phrases, those have such a bearing on how we make our financial decisions today. So when it comes to mastering the money, it's really the mindset, how our relationship with money is as well. How are we treating it? And here's another example. You ever hear people say money is the root of all evil? And it's actually a misquoted Bible quote, or Bible scripture, I should say, and it's the love of money. So it's things like that when people aren't aware and mindful of the words that we're using or where some of these concepts are coming from, that really has a big impact on how we make our decisions. And there's a big, huge impact in our relationship with money, because you can either have a really good one or a really bad one. I mean, even like, here's another example, we have taxes, right? And you can either look at it like, oh, I hate these taxes, I hate paying it. Of course, there's that natural feeling. Or can you shift your mindset and look at it as, I'm grateful to pay these taxes because this means I made money, I made income, I made a living, I was able to pay for the things that I enjoy in my life. So you see how there's this shift in how you are looking at things in your life when it deals with money, because it's in so many aspects of our life. It's a lot of it has to do with your perspective and your perception of how you're approaching your relationship with money.
Wow, that's awesome. I really there's so many different examples that you gave, and I love all of them. But I do want to go back to one, and when you're talking about how your thought of money can come from your mom or your dad, or it can be something that comes up as you go. And so then you talked about certain sayings, or just hearing things as a child. And so I guess, those are connected, obviously, but do those create money blocks for us as we grow older, or those maybe money blocks that came up for us and we didn't even realize it and we've just kind of went through life with them? Or
that's a great question. It does. They can become money blocks, and until you either become aware or mindful of it, it's buried in your subconscious. So it's not at the forefront of your mind on the conscious side of your brain. So you can be going through life. So any examples are great to illustrate these concepts. So for example, let's say you did grow up in a household. Maybe there was a situation where you had a single mom. So she's struggling, and you witnessed that as a child, and you've heard her say things like, we can't afford this, or we don't have enough money. So as a child, you're seeing this, you're experiencing this. So by the time that child grows up to be an adult and now they're working, things like, they can either develop a spending spree habit where they're kind of out of control and then they don't have enough money to pay the bills, or it could be they saw the mom struggle so much that they either go the complete opposite side of the spectrum and hoard the money, or they're afraid to spend it. So it can go either way. So, it's not all one cookie cutter. It's really, and that's, you're talking about, or we were talking about comparing. So everybody's situation is extremely unique. Everybody's situation from growing up as a child up into adulthood to the present time is completely shaped and formed very, very differently between each other. So when I remember that, I think, it's so silly of us to compare. And I know it's so hard not to, but we have to remember that behind the curtain, behind the scenes, everybody's background is different. So, going back to the example of that child growing up, you can see how it can manifest into so many different financial problems. So if it was a situation where they decided to just buy everything, the reasoning could be, well, you know what? I grew up, I didn't have anything. Now that I have money, I feel like I deserve to have this stuff because I wasn't able to have it when I was a little kid. That could be one route that can be taken. And the other way it could go is like, you know what? I saw my mom struggle. I'm not going to have that happen to me. And, so there's this fear. Now there's this inherent fear that they don't want to go through the struggle that they witnessed their mother going through as a child. So what's the solution? Coming to that middle ground, that happy medium where it's now a healthy relationship and there's a balance where they feel that they can spend money on things that they can enjoy, but still also not have that fear of like, I'm having this scarcity. I'm afraid this is going to happen to me like it did to my mom. So it's all about becoming aware and mindful first, and then finding the solution to come to the middle, depending on where they're at, but just finding that middle ground that there is this harming, this balance, and improving the relationship with money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit more about comparison, because I find this really interesting, is that, there's so many different avenues of it, right? So for starters, there's keeping up with the people next door, right? So Joe over here's got a swimming pool and maybe I don't, and I'm feeling a little bit like envious of it. But sometimes there's a backstory to Joe. Maybe he went into complete debt buying his pool, but I just never knew that, right? And so do you want to explain a little bit how comparison can be hurtful to us?
Absolutely. It's so hurtful. Especially not only to you because you are the one experiencing it, but hurtful to, especially if you have children or people around you, because we have to remember that our actions and even our thoughts, especially the words we use, and we may think it's so innocent, or maybe we don't think we don't give as much credit to our words as we should be. So for example, like the mom I was telling you about, like, or anytime you hear that, oh, we can't afford it. Every time that's heard, every time that's said, that's starting to plant a seed in the subconscious mind of the person hearing it, and then you can see what happens. So when it comes to comparing, it is very hurtful. So, there could even be jealousy where, for example, well, they just have money to blow, or, you start to hear like negative phrases. So that can even create this idea of like, well, is money bad? Does that mean I shouldn't want to have nice things? Does that mean because the neighbor has a pool, but my bitter parents are saying these things? You see how it just kind of all intertwines and it plays out like that. But, going back to the core thing about comparing, everybody's situation, and I love what you said, Jessie. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if the neighbor went into debt. And I remember this one situation. There was a prospect. I didn't end up getting them as a client. They were very close-minded. And this was during the mortgage heyday. We had a mortgage meltdown, in the 2008, 2009 era. And I remember sitting down this prospect happened to be in the lending industry as well. And during this time, I'm gonna tell you, I saw so many people accumulating cars, investment properties. Everybody looked amazing on paper, right? But when I would sit down and I would look at their, the credit cards and the real stuff, it was like, oh my gosh, no savings, massive debt, all kinds of stuff. And I tell people, it's kind of like I'm a doctor. You might see somebody that looks very healthy, right? You don't fit, they don't look overweight. But until you do the blood and the vitals and all those things, it's not until you get the blood work done. That's when things are revealed, right? Oh, you have cholesterol. Oh, you have, you're on the verge of diabetes, but they look healthy on the outside. It is the same idea when it comes to money. So I was telling people, because I had this comparison discussion with so many clients, because they'd be like, yeah, but our friends have a bigger house, or, it looks like they have all this stuff. And I had to say, stop. I said, you know what, let me tell you something. You don't have the opportunity like I do to go behind the scenes. I see what's happening behind the scenes. I go, you may have a smaller house, or you may think that you don't have a lot, but you are not in the red. meaning you're not in the negative, where all these people that had these big homes or multiple homes and, you know, all this stuff, the Joneses, like, you know, we're so used to hearing, you have no idea that you are probably comparing yourself to something that you shouldn't be. So now you're comparing apples and oranges. And that's the thing I want to really, really impart on everybody here, that you don't know the story. You don't know the whole story behind the scenes, and you may not even realize that you probably are better off. But even if you were worse off, the point is that everybody walks their own journey. Everybody has their own story. Everybody grew up a different way. So again, you are comparing for almost like no reason, because you don't know the full story. You're not in the same situation. You didn't grow up in the same house. So it's just like you want to shift that, and you want to keep your mindset really, really healthy, where you realize, like, you know, I'm in control of my own destiny. If there's something that I want to do, or there's something I want to manifest, or there's something I want to create, I have the ability to do that. It doesn't matter what my neighbor or my brother or, you know, my best friend is doing. We have our own journey. If you have a spouse or a partner, or, you know, I have my own journey. I have to only just be paying attention to who I am, what I'm doing, and am I on the right track to get there?
Mm-hmm. That's so good. That's so good. I just love everything about what you just said, because it's so relatable, and it's something that, you know, everybody needs to hear and be reminded of all the time, right? Because it's easy to just see somebody that has something that you want and instantly go, oh, you know, feel envious about it, but not realizing the whole big picture. So thanks for putting that into perspective.
Yes.
So my next question, sorry, my thing just fell out. My next question is about overwhelm and financial overwhelm. And is there like something that you, because you do see behind the scenes for your clients and for so many people, and is there anything that sticks out to you that is one of the biggest things that people feel overwhelmed about when it comes to finances or money or budgeting?
I would say the biggest area of overwhelm is when there is no plan. And the overwhelm tends to come from a space where, and this happens to all of us, you're going about your life, you're going about your business, your work, you know, if you got kids, you know, we know how it is with children, small children especially. You're just going by the seat of your pants, right? You're just trying to survive and live and make sure things are getting taken care of. And then the finances kind of get, you know, oh, let's pay that bill. Oh, did you take care of that? And so there's this overwhelm starts to happen when there's no plan in place. And then it gets to this saturation point where, oh my gosh, we're starting to skip bills, or oh my gosh, we're behind, or we haven't started saving yet, or I haven't even contributed to any type of retirement plan. And so it isn't until certain things start to pop up and they start paying attention to it, that's when you're going like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And so I see that the overwhelm is coming from, you know, especially credit card debt. I think that's probably the biggest one that I see the most overwhelm come from, where, okay, I have totally outdone myself. I have totally racked up and maxed out my cards, and I'm always behind. And so the overwhelm really comes from no organization, not having a moment to really sit down and ask, you know, yourself, what am I doing? You know, do I even know what I'm doing? It's that simple to just say, like, what am I doing? You know, you start to get to this point where, okay, you're missing payments, you're late on bills. And so, you know, it's in all varying degrees and levels, where some people's responsibility levels are like, you know, one's really bad and one's pretty decent. But it just comes down to breathing and taking a step back and finally saying to yourself, okay, enough's enough. What can we do? Because we have got to take control of this. That's where the overwhelm comes from. It's not having control of what's going on. You don't even know what's going on. It's kind of like, okay, you know, you get your paycheck if you have a job, or you know, okay, this client came through, I got some money and now I can pay this bill. You know, it's kind of like haphazardous, right? There's not a solid plan in place where you've allocated certain money to this particular bill or this particular savings goal. You're just kind of going about it. And when this organization is so present, you are just coming upon the verge of feeling that overwhelm. So I really think it just comes down to simply saying there's probably lack of organization happening in your life when it comes to managing your money.
Mm-hmm. I could see that totally. So do you have some strategies that you work with people to help them to get out of overwhelm or to kind of get on track? Or, I mean, I know that you do. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, depending on what the person needs, most people will go through the money coaching because, for example, I can put a plan together, but if I've seen this pattern where they've tried to do a budget and they couldn't stick to it, or there was intention to do something and then it fell apart, usually there's something on the subconscious level that hasn't been addressed yet. They haven't really understood why is this repeating, and more importantly, where did it come from, and then finding out what do we need to do to change that habit or whatever it is that we find out is the root or the source, and what's the thing that we need to replace it with. It's almost like unlocking this door where, oh, now I know why I'm doing that. For example, I like to use examples because I think they're relatable. Like, I had a client who was 9 years old in the car with his dad, and he said, "Daddy, can we get McDonald's?" And the dad turned around and said, "Do you have money for that?" And it's a 9-year-old kid. And so just that simple interaction, and even when I was listening to it, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I talking to my kid? And that one incident, he's now 44. He remembered that incident, but that was part of why he developed a negative relationship with money. And so when we uncovered that, he started realizing, oh my gosh, this is why I don't save. This is why and he had a really strange relationship. It was like he'd be crazy and buying stuff on Let Go and those sites where you can get like things people are selling. And then there would be times like he didn't want to pay bills. He would like hang on to the money to the last minute because he just couldn't part with the money. So there was like this weird, money was being spent and the money wasn't being used for bills. And it was this really strange situation. But when those types of things get uncovered and you're now cognizant of what's happening, it unlocks something. And so what happens is he was able to start putting a plan into place. I'm so proud of him. He's moving into a new place. I mean, just things just started shifting for him. So, that's why it's so important to go through some kind of process like that. If you're starting to see yourself repeating certain patterns and you're kind of like, I don't know why this keeps happening to me. So, but a simple thing that you can do to start is to just sit down and start to look at where your situation is. Like, just take one day, even a Saturday morning or whatever day you want to do it, and lay everything out, all the bills, all the expenses, all sources of income. And just really take a look and assessment of like, okay, what does my situation look like right now? And look at what's coming in, the income versus expenses. And then even just start taking a look like, you don't even need something fancy. If you just want to use a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet, whatever works for you. And people ask me that too, like, well, what should I use? I'm like, you use what you're going to use. The best one you're going to use is the one that you're going to actually implement. And so even list out like, okay, this bill is due on this day. I think it's even that basic because sometimes people don't even know. They just I've met people that they don't find out that a bill was due until they get the late payment notice. So, I've seen varying degrees of like, wow, oh my goodness, you let it go that far. Something's going on here. We need to really correct this because you're wasting money in fees, $35 late fees and payments and things like that. So just get organized. I think that's the biggest place that you can start, the best place. Get organized, understand what's coming in, what's going out, and when are things due. And then when you can get to that place, if especially if the credit card situation is an issue, then you really need to understand that which ones have the highest interest, list out the balances, and just really start putting together a spending plan. And that's part of like in an overall picture, what I kind of walk people through in the foundational level. And then we move on to accountability and growth, where okay, now that we kind of got this part done, what are goals that you haven't hit yet? What are some things like, it could be as simple as like, hey, you know what, we haven't taken a family vacation in like years. How can we save up to do that? Or sometimes it's, this is my favorite because I work with entrepreneurial women that are just, getting into it. And they're in that phase where like, I want to really take this side hustle to another level and eventually leave my job. And so just kind of helping her get through that. Okay, how do you get organized before you make that jump? Because, if you don't have the personal stuff down, adding to the mix, and I know it's like that's a whole different issue. Now you got business expenses, right? So it's making sure that foundation is set over here before you start adding this one, or if you have it in place, it's just making sure that, okay, we're doing the right things, it's organized. So I would just say that's a basic place to start, getting organized and really understanding what is it that you have, and not be in the dark anymore. Don't be that person who gets the thing in the mail and then you just never open the envelopes, because trust me, I've seen it.
I believe it. People deal with their overwhelm or deal with finances in all different ways. And I mean, I guess if you don't know, and it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation when we were in school, if you were never taught and you've never taken it upon yourself to learn, or you don't know what you need to learn, so you just don't learn, then you get stuck and it can just snowball so fast, right? Jen, I love how you just say it like it is. You don't beat around the bush, and I really appreciate that. It's
You're
great.
it's all from a place of love, trust me. Yeah, it's all from love, a place of love.
I love it. Tell us about the book in the bag. You've got the Do Before I Do. Let's talk about that.
Thank you. Yes, so this is the 5th book I wrote. The 6th one's actually getting printed. So this is a book about couples, and I'll tell you the premise. So Do Before I Do is about having conversations with your partner about money that we weren't taught how to have, right? Sometimes I think we meet somebody and we just think, oh, we're in love, we get along, and that's great and all, but then do people really always take the step to find out, are you financially compatible? And usually the answer is no. Usually the answer is like, oh, we didn't talk about that, because we don't think about it. I think society places this idea that it's just all romantic love and it's about the emotions, right? But the reality of it, and if you're married or if you're in a serious relationship, and that money is a huge factor. And so I actually went through a divorce in 2009, and I remember even some friends, like there was like this phase that people were going through, and I don't know if it's because of a result of the market crash at that time, but it got me thinking about, people that were going through this process of divorce. And I remember sitting in a workshop where I was helping women, but the thing that really hit me at the end of it, I was like, you know what? Why am I trying to help them at the end of it? It's almost like too late. I mean, they can be helped, but the interesting thing was that they were going through such an emotional moment that they didn't want to think about the money. They needed to sit with a therapist and a family law attorney first. Like the money was like the last thing on their mind, ironically. So then I realized, like, you know what, let's be proactive. And it doesn't matter whether you're going through a divorce or not. I think the whole thing with money that we all need to understand and appreciate is that we need to be proactive so that we don't have to be reactive. And so I realized, like, why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't we be proactive in having these conversations about money so that they're not a surprise? I mean, you're not probably going to be able to cover every single thing, but there are some key things that need to be discussed, because that is actually one of the biggest reasons for divorce. It's the money situation. It's the money topics. And a lot of times they're not talked about. So if you haven't talked about money with your partner, even as much as like, I mean, there was a study by Fidelity that they found, like, I think it was like as high as like 40% of couples didn't even know what their partner made in terms of salary. And I remember reading that thinking, how can they plan if they don't even know what's going on? So it's so important to know what's going on, because if you are together, how can you build a financial future together? How can you build this empire together if you don't know what's going on and you haven't asked these tough questions? So that's what the book is about, diving into those topics that some people feel like, oh, because here's, talking about mindset, we were saying earlier, how many of you have heard you shouldn't talk about money? That's taboo. But then when are you supposed to talk about it? When you're on the verge of getting a divorce? I mean, so it's like, I see all these things that we hear in society. I'm like, we have to debunk this. We have to debunk this, because we cannot move forward like this anymore. It is not healthy for us.
That's such a great topic to write a book on, Jen. And it's interesting that you said 40%. Did you say 40% of couples don't know?
Something like that. Yeah.
That's crazy. And
yeah.
As soon as you said, people get married and don't realize, I was thinking, my debt is your debt now, which is true, right?
Imagine finding out, and I write about all the stuff I did wrong. Oh, it's in there. I'm like, yeah. So I joke around that the title is Do Before I Do. I should have like a subtitle, Do is what I don't do. Don't do what I did. I talk about those things because that happened to me. It's like, oh, I didn't know you had a crappy credit score. And, we couldn't even buy a house together. I ended up having to get a cosign, and I was finding out at the wrong time. Oh gosh, but imagine if you find out after you're already married. And now you don't even really have an opportunity to like, hey, how do you feel about this? Are you gonna help me fix this? It's like you said, it's all ours now. It is all combined now.
It sounds like a lot of the things that you wrote about in that book could be relatable to people even if they aren't getting married.
Absolutely. Yes, because even if you are not married or you're planning to be you're looking for somebody. I mean, imagine what a place of empowerment that is to have your own stuff ready to go. You're already organized. You have your goals set in place. And it's gonna sound funny, but I mean, like, wow, you are really marketable, right? You got your stuff together. You're not a hot mess, So like, if it's good, even if you aren't in a relationship. So yes, the concepts and the principles still apply. I mean, it doesn't matter what our status is. Everybody needs to be organized when it comes to money. So yeah.
That's funny. So you got a couple of resources for our listeners. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yes. So I'm giving you guys the first 3 chapters. And I love the first 3 chapters because it isn't really about the money part. It's about you working on you as an individual. So just like Jessie said, you don't have to be getting married, because I think every time you want to do better, it really starts with doing the inner work. So that's the beginning part where it's a lot of self-reflection and really understanding okay, where am I at right now? And how do I feel about these things? And it's also important to do that because if you do have a partner, then it's very easy for us to either blame the other person or attack. So it's really setting the tone for understanding okay, we're preparing to come from a place of love and respect, and being open and compassionate and not judgmental. So it's that kind of prep work, and it's great even if you don't have somebody. So definitely that. And then if you are also somebody that happens to be going through debt, credit card issues, there's some resources there. They're free apps, so it's really easy. I like easy. It's online. You can plug the stuff in there, and it'll help you decide which debts to pay off. I remember. I know there was 4 of them or something like that. And so so there's that. And then there's another one, checklist of how to manage money together. Some little quick things about, what do you need to do, whether it's okay, life insurance or estate planning. Before I even got into this industry, I look back and I think I didn't know any of this stuff. How are we supposed, and that's the thing. It's so important to get this information out there because it's really setting up people for success so that they don't run into financial failure, which I have gone through myself. And it's just one of those things that's it's almost like you just kind of go and you're like, oh, I didn't know we needed that. I didn't know we needed that too. So it's just giving you guys these ideas that, look into this. I'm not saying do all of it at once, but I tell people baby steps. Again, you don't build a house in one day. It's foundation, and then build and build and build and build. Yeah.
That's awesome. Those resources sound really valuable, and I'll post the link to all of them below our interview so everybody can access them easily. And I'll also post how people can get in touch with you, Jen, because I'm sure that there's going to be some questions that come up as people watch this interview. So I'll post what's the best way to get in touch with you? Facebook or?
Yeah, so you can either go to Facebook or Instagram, Twitter. You can reach me. The handle is @JenMoneyCoach, or you can just go to the website, jenmoneycoach.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jen. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode of Unleash Your Confidence.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us.
Bye.